Good morning and welcome to day 8 of the Feldenkrais Awareness Summit. We are moving along and having some great adventures and conversations, and I'm really excited about talking with today's guest. Before we do, though, of course, I just need to do a little bit of housekeeping for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, or even if you've been here before and haven't tried to use the chat. I just want to give you an idea of the chat function. Somewhere on your screen, you'll see it. So if you want to take a moment to familiarize yourself with that, it'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to other people who are listening and watching at the same time. Ask questions as you're going along. Also, in this morning's presentation, Annie is going to be presenting a short awareness through movement sequence that if you want to, you don't have to, but if it's easy for you, if you could grab either a couple of towels or a couple of blankets so that when she comes to the lesson, you can use that. They're not absolutely essential, but they'll give you a different kind of experience. So please take a moment to do that as we're starting to talk, or give yourself some time to grab something. So without further ado, I'm so excited. I've actually known Annie for several years, and it's been wonderful to watch her develop her work. For those of you who don't know Annie Thoe, she is Annie Thoe. Already I'm doing it wrong. She is an assistant trainer in the Feldenkrais method, but besides being a Feldenkrais teacher, Annie has such a huge background in all kinds of movement, the martial arts, and mind-body work. And then from that mind-body work, she's done massage, kinesiology, she's studied philosophy. But the thing that's really interesting is how Annie has put together her love of nature. And Annie is also a graduate, an Anake graduate of the Wilderness Awareness School. And one of the things that I love about that is that, again, it uses the word awareness. So it's awareness through movement, awareness in the wilderness. And Annie has put all that together into a series of many programs. She's got over 39 audio programs that are available. And I'm going to let Annie do the rest of the talking because she knows more about all of this than I do. So Annie Thoe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Flaminia. Flaminia, here I go.
Good, Lavinia. Now we're even.
I have a friend named Flaminia. Lavinia, we're playing with each other's names here. How fun, how fun. Well, I'm here to represent the deer today and what the deer offer us in awareness. And I've been reflecting over why the deer. Why do we want to move like the deer? And there are many reasons, particularly today in our time right now when the earth is really in a crisis. And there's a lot to learn from the deer. The deer are all over the world, and they, I'll talk more about them in a moment, but we're going to be doing some lessons today that have been inspired to me from watching deer and hanging out with the deer, and will help us with survival, actually, and thriving in difficulty, because the deer are wonderful teachers in moving with grace and balance. And so I feel like they're just an awesome Feldenkrais teacher.
That's so interesting that you brought up the word survival, because I was thinking about the deer and how the deer, they talk about the human being as being descended from predators, and that the deer is generally prey. Mm-hmm. And, so I was asking myself, why would I want to move like the deer? And so I don't know, you just sort of touched on it, but it's really interesting to think about what the difference is between moving like a predator or moving like prey as you're moving through nature. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all.
Yeah. So one of the practices I've learned from doing a lot of naturalist and survival training is you have to move like the animals. You practice moving like various animals. And at the Wilderness Awareness School, we do this as a warm-up each day. Different than martial arts animal practices, but kind of similar. And you walk around in the consciousness of a cougar or of a deer or of anything, any animal that you choose. Raccoons, you know, they use their hands. And so you really get in your senses pretending to be like these animals. And it's a very useful practice, and it really heightens your senses. So the deer, I'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment, but the deer have these special gifts that will really help us move better.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly because they're prey. Particularly because they're prey animals.
Particularly because they're prey animals. And I was also interested in, you know, and I know you're familiar with this, there's this whole movement right now going on of learning how to walk in the forest or learning how to go in the forest. And I'm sure you've read about that. And I was just wondering whether, you know, whether in your experience of just walking in the forest is enough for somebody, or whether they really need to train in some way to feel more connected to nature.
That's a wonderful question. I've been to Africa twice, and the second time I really wanted to hang out with one of the real, quote, primitive cultures that lives in Tanzania in the Serengeti. They've been there for 10,000 years, the same tribe called the Hadza people or Hadzabe. And I had a really amazing opportunity with a friend, the two of us with a couple guides and this little band of Hadzabe people hanging out. And let me play for you just a short clip of these guys walking in the woods, because it's pretty amazing. So I'm going to share something here. And I have done all kinds of training with walking in the woods. So just a second. Here we go. Here's the Hadzabe people. So these two men were out in the Serengeti. We're going on a hunt. And I'm going to pause it. Let's see. Oh, it's very quick. I edited this, so you just get a little bit. The guy in the back actually has a little bit of a hip injury, but the guy in the front, if you look at him, it's a little blurry. Let's see if I can get it clearer there. If you look at his head right on top of his leg, it's this beautiful plumb line. And even the guy in the back who has this injury, but he moves very, very well. He also, you can see this beautiful line of balance right on top of their feet. And they were never out of breath. We hiked with them all day long, and I was huffing and puffing because I was having the video camera at times. But I was just so impressed with how relaxed they were and aware throughout their whole walk. So let's come back here. There we go. So anyhow, that's just a wonderful short clip of walking with some people that are the masters in my mind in the whole world, because they survive on just hunting and gathering, these people, and have done successfully so for 10,000 years. Pretty amazing.
Wow.
So yes, there's lots of ways of walking in the woods. The thing about walking in the woods that we don't realize is most of the time we are walking so loudly, not only with our bodies, but our minds, that the birds are just running like mad, alarming, telling all the animals where we are. And so we tend not to see much wildlife. We scare it all away. It's called a plow effect. Like you walk through and all the wildlife just disperses, you know. And maybe in Central Park and places that are conditioned to see people, they don't run away as far. They might just move to an upper branch or a little bit away because they know people are clueless. But in general, if you're walking with these Hadzabe people, you're very aware of what the birds are saying and what's responding in the environment. So you might stop and listen and walk like this guy did right over his feet.
So I guess for me, one of the questions was how does all of this experience in nature, how has that influenced you in Feldenkrais? Is that something that you wanted to present to us, or you want to just talk?
Oh, absolutely. So Feldenkrais is so much about how you function in life, how much easier can we function. And being in nature is one of the quickest ways to wake up your senses, your movement. A lot of times it cuts through what many lessons indoors would take to do in just one time being outside, because nature engages us so strongly when we tune into nature. And particularly survival type situations really make you function at a higher level. But there's a lot about nature and putting yourself outdoors and doing some of these awareness exercises, these lessons that I have that can really speed up your coordination, reflexes, sight, hearing, everything. Really tunes you up quickly.
So in a Feldenkrais lesson, we're lying on the floor. We talk about being in a safe environment. We move very slowly. How do those two things work together when you're, as you said, speeding up your reflexes, tuning everything up? How do they go together?
Very good question. So that's why I chose the deer as an animal to work with here. And can I take a picture of the deer just to show you here? I've got one.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's just use this one. And I'm going to share. These are photos that I have taken on Whidbey Island. This one's on Whidbey Island. And so look at this deer in this photo. This deer it looks like a statue, right? Isn't that true? Like sometimes you look at a deer, you're not even sure it's alive. It's so solid. And deer have this amazing ability to stand motionless still and for a long time. I mean, sometimes half hour or longer, I've seen them stand motionless, barely even blinking. And of course, this is a survival technique, but they have to be incredibly relaxed to stand in this manner and to hold a position. Sometimes they might even have, like one leg up in the air or something. So a lot of the games that we play as children, we imitate this stuff where we, freeze and we have to stand still. And if we move, you're it or something like that. And these are type of awareness games outdoors that you can play them indoors too, but outside, there's other elements. There's wind, there's noises, distractions, and it makes you learn to focus and be relaxed and very still and aware. I'll go ahead and stop sharing that. Okay, back.
Back. Okay. So they have this capacity for stillness, and then they have this capacity for movement. You want to talk a little bit about how the deer's movement relates to our work?
Yeah, so that photo, it probably still fresh in your mind with their feet on the ground. The deer have to rely on their legs, and we're a standing species ourselves. We stand a lot, and the deer have to be extremely well organized for everything they do is standing from birth. And so this ability to be organized, to connect to the ground is something that deer do very well, or they die. And so I've taken that and looked at, okay, how are we connected to the ground? Because the more grounded we are, the more relaxed we are. So that's the next picture I want to show you here. This is a picture of, there we go. And so this is just same area, but check out this deer. This deer is so relaxed and grazing. I was able to get a shot of that. And they're so grounded, they know by their hearing and their sensing, their hair on their body, their feet can feel vibration. They know if there's any danger from a long ways away, and they can stay relaxed and feed. And this is something like we are so not connected to in our culture anymore, as far as like eating and being relaxed, or when the tiger's in the room. Like we don't seem to resonate what's really something that should be stressful and what's not. And deer are constantly needing to be on guard for predators, but they also can quickly relax, and partly they're so well grounded through their legs. So that's another thing I just amazed with how they can be stressed, something can attack them, and then minutes later, they can relax and start feeding again.
Yeah, that's a capacity I think that we struggle with in our contemporary society because there's so many things coming at us. We're like constantly on yellow alert, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how did you develop this style? I mean, I'm hoping that we get to experience a little bit of Feldenkrais,
Absolutely.
a la Annie Thoe. That what was the process? Can you talk a little bit about the
Yeah.
process? I mean, I know that you grew up with nature and you've been doing Feldenkrais for a really long time. So how did it kind of come together for you?
Yeah. It's amazing how closely they go together because Feldenkrais talks so much about survival and what you need in order to survive. And as a kid, I was always very curious, could I survive with like just a knife and like go out in the woods and survive? I was always curious about that and afraid like that I wouldn't be able to survive. And so that was kind of nagging at me. And oddly enough, I was hearing it from Moshe in his tapes from the Amherst training. And at the same time, someone handed me the Tom Brown tracker book. He wrote, Tom Brown is a famous tracker who started a school in New Jersey. And one of his chief apprentices started the Wilderness Awareness School in Seattle. That's the guy that I mostly studied that school from. But I did study with Tom. And anyway, Tom Brown writes so much about surviving with just a knife. And I looked in the back of the book and I thought, this guy's still alive. I'm going to his training. So that summer I went to a Tom Brown training. I was just totally hooked. And I did a whole bunch of his trainings. And then I went on to do the wilderness schools, everything they had, including their year-long program, their tracking program, and all that kind of stuff. So, and I did all those survival things with just the knife. And it was unbelievable how much I learned in such a short time period, whether it was an overnight or a 7-day survival trip. Unbelievable sense of confidence, of wisdom, of understanding conservation, understanding how to work with the body, all the things that Feldenkrais talks about, and it gets put to a test. So yeah, they dovetail so well together, and it really takes the awareness of inside the room, inside the Feldenkrais classroom, out into the outdoors.
Yeah. I love that they both have the word awareness in them.
Yes.
So do you have something that you want to share with us that we can explore, or do you want to talk more about your theory a little bit? How do you
No, I'll start with one. Let's start with a practice right off the bat.
Okay,
the first practice to get started is called the sit spot. The sit spot practice is something you can do in your backyard, but you need to be outside, even if it's just on your deck, and that counts. Anything where you're out of the house. So those of you who don't have a backyard, you can do it on your balcony or the front stoop or something like that. And the idea is to sit for a half hour, ideally, because it takes about a half hour for your nervous system to calm down enough to start to get in sync with the natural world. Half hour. Now, of course, with practice, that might get quicker, but it really does take quite a bit of training for your nervous system to get in that harmonious state. So that's actually how I got initiated with this work. I started doing all the sit spot practice and having these amazing experiences. Somebody who loved to be outdoors as a kid. I mean, I was always playing outside. I was always in the woods, but I'd never sat still in one spot every day and observed and practiced some awareness routines of listening with my ears, looking, feeling, sensing the wind, all these little details, these nuances. And I had no idea how little I knew of the natural world, how I had never heard birds before. I'd never noticed certain shrubs or trees. I didn't know the names of things. It was remarkable how little I knew for somebody who loved nature as much as I did.
Well, so hopefully nobody's running outside right now to try to do this practice, because then we
Yeah,
wouldn't be
yeah.
able to
You
continue.
want to talk more about it? Yeah.
Right. But I mean, I have some questions about one, the practicality of it. If you do live in the city, for example, and you want to be in the same spot every day for half hour, how do you see someone being able to do that? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, obviously you have some flexibility a little bit, but you try to make it a routine. Usually the morning is one of the best times to do it, but it's recommended do it different times of the day. So maybe you shoot for a certain time of the day that's your regular time, so you can notice changes of patterns. And then maybe have other times of the day too, because there's birds come in at different times and they leave, and different animals have different patterns. And it's incredible. It's better than any nature channel on TV, because just this weekend, for instance, I have this nature spot that's outside of the city. It's my secret spot. We call it your secret spot. You do not disclose what that location is. And I had really wanted to go see the geese before they left up north. And there's a place to do that, but I thought, I'm going to go to my secret spot. So I went to my spot, and I was going to give myself 2 hours, 2 luxurious hours there. And I just had a journal, and I was just chilling out and watching. And I was thinking, God, I'm sorry I'm not seeing the geese. And then suddenly a huge, like the whole horizon, I could hear them coming, the calling of the geese, and they came over my head. And it was just like, it was like a chorus of angels flew over, And I just thought, oh my God, amazing. And then like a few minutes later, another chorus came just over my head. And about 4 or 5 of these giant lines of geese came. It's probably about 5,000.
Wow.
Went over my head. And I just thought, oh my God, just amazing, right? And so that kind of thing doesn't happen without sort of hanging out for a while, because, if I'd left, I would have missed it, And I was just so thrilled. These are the kinds of things that happen. I'll tell you one other quick story that has to do with a deer. And that's a sit spot where I had a different sit spot in a different part of town. And in a lot of these sit spots, they could be just like nature rough areas, that are undeveloped or something. You could sit on the edge of them in a safe place, make sure it's safe, that you don't feel like there's going to be danger there. And so I was with my dog, and it was a beautiful day, and it was this swampy area that was dry. And there was this bed of grass that looked just right. And I lay down with my dog and fell asleep. And I wake up, and my dog's trembling, and I look up, and there is a buck with antlers and everything looking right over me, wondering, what are we doing there? And my dog, I'm holding her while she's shaking. And as soon as my eyes open, the buck kind of looks and takes off, but I don't know how long he had been watching me sleep, obviously in his bed. I was in the deer bed.
So at first I thought, well, maybe it was like a visitation, but
it was for real.
You had invaded. No. I meant sort of like a spirit animal or something like that.
Oh, right.
But you just had invaded his space. That's kind of interesting. Well, again, you're just bringing up more and more questions for me, because, you said that you went with your journal. And so I was under the impression that I should just sit still and not move. Are you saying that I can be more relaxed and take notes? I guess just trying to
Well, there's different ways to practice a sit spot. Just like there's a lot of different ways to meditate, by the way. So with sit spot practice, you might have an intention where your intention is to just sit as still as you can for a half hour and feel the changes in the wind, and start to notice the moisture in the air, all these different things you can tune into. Because I had 2 hours, I wanted to give myself time to journal. So I brought my journal for that reason. Mm-hmm. And I was mostly quiet sitting much of the time, but I also was able, as you know, I love to write. So It's a great place to
You were
write.
able to fall asleep as well. So,
And you can definitely take naps. We highly encourage. Yeah.
so, and the other thing that you reminded me of when you were talking about this, well, there's two things. One is, you know, you had this gift for the first sit spot of the geese kind
Yeah.
of, you know, a payoff, but that payoff doesn't always happen,
That's
right?
right.
You don't get the remarkable event every single time.
Right.
So, you know, how can you find the wealth in sort of minutia or small impressions? And so I was thinking about that. And then I was thinking about, I'm not sure if you're familiar with David George Haskell's writing. He wrote a
No.
book. He wrote a book called The Forest Unseen.
Uh-huh.
And it's a book where he spent a year, I guess you could call it his sit spot. He called it his forest mandala, where he had marked out 1 square meter in the middle of the forest in Tennessee and went there all year long and just looked at that square, not just on the ground, but above, and wrote about that in his book, which is similar to what you're saying. But of course, being a biologist or something, he also had a loop and he was like looking at.
Yeah. How interesting.
So I guess the question becomes, how do I make the practice my own, as opposed to feeling like I have to follow a formula?
Yeah. Well, just like Feldenkrais, you might try
True.
some recommendations, you know, like lessons that have been suggested versus just making up your own Feldenkrais lessons, which is the same kind of question in that regard. It's nice to have a bit of a structure. So taking a half hour, noticing there are some, if you do there's a home study course with the Wilderness School, they have that walks you through different awareness practices each time you go. So it's quite interesting. You might notice the trees around you, you might notice the birds, you might notice the wind, and all these different things to notice. And there's a lot to notice. Just like with Feldenkrais, there's a lot to notice with all sensing your body. It's as big as the outdoors in my mind. It's very similar analogy. And you can get lost. You can not know how to begin to do that awareness journey. So it's nice to have some concrete guidance. And I do have some videos that guide people through sit spot practices. People can try those. Generally, even if you don't get to see like a bird or something like that, there is some magical quality that happens when your nervous system attunes to the natural world. It's very calming to the nervous system to slow down and get clearer. And so that's one of the immediate trade-offs. Is it's a different type of meditation impact. Yeah.
So you have this relationship to nature and the forest, and then, you know, early on as we were talking, you were somehow alluding that people in hunter-gatherer tribes have a closer relationship to this quality of movement, you know, the little video that you showed. And I remembered you had talked about the people in Rwanda. And
yeah, I have a video of those guys.
Yeah, you know, because the idea of how they use balance, for example, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, wonderful. So let me show this. Here we go. So these are some ladies in Rwanda that everybody was walking around like this. It seemed like, let's get the full screen. Check this out. Look at that. I mean, just holding a couple of those giant squash or papayas or mangoes or whatever they are pretty heavy. Can you imagine how heavy that is on top of your head? And look how relaxed her arm is. She's got a child on her back, the one lady, and just incredible. Let's try another one here. So, okay, let me just do this. I'm not so good at that. Okay, let's try this one. Did it share? No?
You're sharing the screen. I don't see the picture yet. I mean, I just see the...
There we go.
There we go.
So this is what, I thought was, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
So this woman, look at her posture compared to these ladies. How interesting. It's a contrast that makes me think of the potential of why aren't we carrying more things on our head, number one. Because the posture in Africa, people were so elegant the way they walked around, just beautifully soft and just wearing, you know, little flip-flops and things, none of these fancy orthotic shoes and so on, but just their gait was gorgeous. Yeah. So now I'll show you this other video. Here we go. And we're going to share. So this is near where the gorillas live. And these ladies, they dance for quite a while with their water canisters on their heads. They went down to the ground with them. They did all kinds of things with these water canisters. And certainly inspiring compared to just functionally what that lifestyle there does for movement. So, you know, sitting at the computer all day, we don't get to move like that, unfortunately. And I don't know if it's a good idea to put a water jug on your head while you're at the computer, but.
I was just remembering when I was a kid and I was sent to charm school because my posture was so bad. We had to walk with books on our heads.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And somewhere along the line, that whole idea became something about tension. It was very tense to try to walk on your head instead of feeling elegant and relaxed with a book on your head.
Yeah. And that's where the pelvis comes in. So I'm going to do this next part of the lesson because the pelvis is such an important place to organize really well for movement in general, for anything, but particularly for walking in the woods. So a lot of my lessons in walking in the woods, it actually started from, I did this incredible hike once where I had to carry my dog down this mountain and it was going to rain, it was getting dark and I had to hurry and I started having these cramps in my legs and I couldn't walk and I had to figure out what to do. And I thought, well, this is what Feldenkrais is all about. So I'll share with you this slide. So, is it there?
Not yet.
Now, you got it now?
Yeah.
I'm sitting. Okay, so it's full screen. So this wasn't at this, I took this photo after that experience because it was getting dark then. But what I did was I sat and straddled a log and I was feeling my sit bones on the log. And then I was contracting a little bit my muscles so that I could make the sit bone go away. And you can do that in your chair right now. As you sit, people often squeeze their buttocks when they sit sometimes if they're tense, and then just relax your butt. And unless your chair is really squishy, you should be able to feel those bones. If your chair is squishy, move to the front of the chair or something so you can feel the bones and practice just this contracting, holding for a moment, and relaxing, all right? It works okay on the chair, but it works much better on a round surface that's pressing into your pelvic floor, okay? Which a log does so nicely. So what I did was I just threw my jacket on the log to make it a little bit softer, and I just did this for a while until the muscles organized around my sit bones, all of those muscles that were spasming, they reorganized, relaxed, and the cramps went away. And, you know, and I kept running down the mountain. They'd start cramping up because I certainly didn't have my pattern perfect. I would find another log and I'd do this, and we made it out before
Wow.
it was too dark out there. So it was an exciting story, but I'm going to show you a way to do this at home without the log. Is you're going to get a blanket roll.
Can you unshare the screen so that we can see you?
What's that?
I was just going to ask you to unshare the screen, so you did it.
Yeah. And let me just, yeah. So I'll just show you I'm going to make a blanket roll. You can do this with towels, but this is a little larger than I usually do, but you roll it up in a cylinder about 8 to 10 inches around. And the reason you don't use a hard foam is because it hurts. It's too hard. Your pelvic floor won't relax enough. Even when you cover the hard foam, it's not quite as giving as this. So, and then I'm gonna actually do this here. Sit on this. I'm on the floor, but it still works. So I'm sitting on the roll. So if you're at home, you can play with making the roll and sitting on it on your chair. And then you can contract your buttock muscles and even pull up the pelvic floor. So that would be like, for women, that'd be pulling up and in like a Kegel, like the vagina, and the man, the scrotum. You pull that up and in and hold it and then relax and let that drop onto that roll. Okay, and we'll do that a couple times. So inhale, try it with an inhale, and pull up and in, and then exhale and drop. We'll do it one more time in a moment. Just keep settling first. And now pull up and in, inhaling, holding, exhale and drop, and let your pelvis, it kind of watersheds the weight evenly on both legs, and that adjusts. If you have an SI joint issue, it'll adjust those. It adjusts all the muscles around your ischial tuberosity, your sit bones. It's fabulous if you're in the middle of a hike or a long walk or something like that. So then take away the roll and just sit at the edge of your chair and feel the difference now with the weight of your body dropping into the chair. It's quite remarkable, and it really takes about a minute or two for this really strong grounding effect. And then if we could, but I'm not going to right now, but if you came up to standing, now you would stand and the weight can go through the pelvis much cleaner now. So that's one of my favorite techniques. I made that up about 20 years ago, and I've got many videos on my YouTube channel with that, different variations of it. So back to you.
Well, you know, that was great. I mean, I didn't get a chance to actually do it with the blanket, but
Yeah.
the experience of connecting with my two sits bones is always so surprising, how the two sides of yourself work differently, and then how you feel yourself more grounded when you let go. This idea that we use in our work of, you know, creating a constraint and then
Yes.
letting it go, you know?
Right. And I've used this, I've told clients how to use this, like on an airplane. You can roll up your jacket, and even though it may not be that big around, it'll give enough of a feedback to the pelvic floor, and then remove it that they can sit comfortably in their airplane seat, or it's great for travel or your car or whatever.
So let's get back to the deer.
Yes.
Because the deer don't have to worry about their ischial tuberosities because they don't spend a lot of time sitting. So can you give us some ideas from a Feldenkrais perspective of how to move like a deer?
Of how to walk like a deer?
Yeah.
What was that last part?
How to move like a deer.
How to move like a deer.
Move, walk, however you want to put it.
Yeah. Well, the reason I did that last part with the blanket roll is just that that if we don't have that connection to our feet, and they have 4 feet and we only have the 2, and so we really need to have those 2 feet grounded And that's why that blanket roll is so important. With four-legged animals, they have four legs to ground themselves, and that gives them a big advantage to be calmer than we are. Our nervous systems get ramped up from not being that grounded. The other thing I will talk about is what I call upright walking, which of course we're upright, but this idea that you mentioned of, you know, having a book on top of your head and just feeling so tense, right? And so working with the pelvis, getting that aligned, and then connecting with your head afterwards allows for this closed loop from your head to your feet. And then we become more like the deer of, they have 4 feet, this with our hands on our heads connecting to our feet. That creates a closed loop of sensation, of feeling the ground with our hands through the head. Does that make sense?
So let me see if I understand you correctly, that we should try to stand or walk with our hands on our heads?
With one hand.
One
Just
hand.
one.
Okay.
This is my third lesson.
Do I press or just leave it resting?
Okay. So we can do this. We'll do the seated first because we're on this platform. It's hard to stand on this computer, but you're going to have your hand flat like a book. All right.
Okay.
And the reason for that is the curved hand, the head's round and we don't know where the top of the head is. So you want to be flat with your hand. All right. And then let's just play a little bit sitting and just shifting your weight to one sitting bone and shifting to the other. All right. And it's a fun little game to play to see if you can feel with your hand your sitting bone. So this is an awareness trick. Can you feel as you shift? And see if it's any different with your other hand, flat hand. Now, we would want to do this standing as well. So we're not going to do this in this format today, but you would take this to standing and feel over one foot and feel over the other foot, okay? Pretty simple. We kind of do that standardly after a lot of Feldenkrais lessons, maybe a private lesson, maybe not so much in a awareness through movement class. People don't often do this, but it's really good to do.
It's really amazing how different it is depending on what hand you have on your head.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I have a whole bunch of different lessons like this in standing and walking because this ability to feel through your head to your foot will inform you how your balance is, how easily it is. So you can be like these people that I had photos of in Africa where they were really plumb lined up with their head with weight on top of their head all the way through their foot and the other arm just hanging along their side, loose, relaxed, yeah? Now, it's hard to do it in this format, but if you're standing and do this, you're gonna tap a heel so that you feel that bone. And here's where the deer comes in, okay? So the deer have these hoofs, and the hoofs protect them, of course, but when they stomp the ground, okay, it's a very solid sensation throughout their whole system. And a lot of times they discharge tension or fear through stomping their feet. Just a few times, boom, and they're done. Like whatever got them all riled up, they've got it out of their system. And so I feel like the Feldenkrais method is just so marvelous with this orientation around the skeleton and the bones in transmitting tension out of the body. And if we don't feel that from head to foot feeling, we kind of walk around like this. And if you're outdoors and you can feel the ground under your feet, there's a calmness that happens from that huge body of live earth under your feet that is extraordinary. You just have to try it sometime when you're outside. Try a Feldenkrais short little lesson like this and see how it feels. It's remarkable.
So do you think it's better in this kind of an experimental movement? And of course, I guess you could just try it all, whichever way you want to do it. But do you were describing like the heel. Do you think it's better to just work through the heel up through the leg, or stomp your foot, or does it matter?
It matters. Great question. It matters that it's the heel, because that's a big bone and it's the weight-bearing bone of the foot.
Mm-hmm.
If you stomp the whole foot, which is just a wonderful question, it's not as clear where the weight is going through. But you can tap the forefoot and then tap the heel, and you'll feel the difference in the way, in the sound they make. There's a lot thumpier, lower sound with the heel than there is with the forefoot, and so forth. But energetically and just weight-wise, you'll feel the weight going right through the heel. Yeah. Now, of course, we don't want to walk with a strong heel strike in barefoot walking, or you'd have a stone bruise on your heel. But just for alignment purposes, you'll sense how your weight stacks up.
So another question about that,
yeah.
Because you can put your heel down on the floor as your leg straightens, and it doesn't quite have the same feeling as if the knee is slightly relaxed.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about that? Because that's, sometimes people, and a lot of times it's interesting that you talked about the heel bruise, because sometimes people are so nervous about hurting their feet that they don't want to create that sound. And yet if they relax their leg a little bit, they'd be able to create the sound without the kind of bruising that happens. Have you had that experience at all with people?
Sure. Obviously, if you've got heel pain or a bone spur in your heel or something like that, you wouldn't want to be slamming your heel down hard. So I'm not suggesting you have to, I'm making all this noise right now, but it's not that it has to be so firm, but a little thump, thump sound. Feldenkrais often, he taught these lessons where you're banging your head, you didn't want to, slam it against the floor, but light. But of course, if that bothers your head, don't do it. And similar with your foot. But the light, soft knee, I agree. You want to have your knee be a little bit soft. The joints have this suspension feeling, that there's a feeling of springiness throughout the whole system. That's what we'd like to feel ideally, is that springy quality in all of our joints. Yeah. Does that answer?
Yeah, no, that I think that's very helpful. I just think that when people want to try these kind of things, the more guidance we can give them.
Absolutely.
In terms of ways to do it, since you're not able to jump up and demonstrate it as you're sitting.
But I do have a whole bunch of my YouTube videos that are free that people can look at with that demonstrating. Yeah.
Oh, good. Complete with sound effects, sure.
Yeah. Dump, dump.
Good. So, well, where do you want to go from here? I mean, you've been studying this, you've been working with this. I mean, where do you feel you're going in your own work regarding this relationship? I mean, do you see yourself creating another wilderness school that integrates Feldenkrais? How do you see yourself continuing now?
Yeah. Well, I know when I started working with this about 20 years ago, I had these really strong experiences, particularly with the birds, and just this awareness that as humans, we have this amazing ability to communicate, not just with each other, but with all of life. And like the birds and the deer, they speak their own language, but they don't necessarily communicate their needs to everybody else. As humans, we have to learn to listen to the natural world. And it's hard right now because a lot of the natural world is dying. I mean, 70% of our bird population, that's huge. So it's a scary time in some ways that for me, I felt this calling to like, how can I listen to the natural world and and take that information I'm getting and put it into practice. What I learned from all of these different species. And I've had just an incredible opportunity to be with all kinds of different animals and birds. And I try to use that in my work because I feel like they speak. They have things to tell us and things to share, and hopefully we can take better care of them and better care of this planet than we've done, you know, that we can find a better way to live in harmony. And so that's my big vision. And I'm writing, and I offer all kinds of different things for people as far as audio programs that infuse this kind of awareness training of connecting with the natural world. I'm creating video. A lot of it's for free, but I'll have more that you can buy, and more programs for people to practice these skills. So that's kind of what I'm doing, creating.
So continuing to integrate your two worlds through materials for others.
Yeah.
As you were talking, I keep coming back to your theme, move like a deer. And I was thinking to myself, how can I practice the actual walking? How can I, I mean, there's this whole thing about barefoot walking.
Yes.
And you said, don't walk with a heavy heel strike. Yeah. I mean, do you have any feelings or opinions in terms of, how you've watched the way the deer move?
What a great question.
They appear out of nowhere. The other day I was driving my car during rush hour on a major road, and they just all decided to cross the street right in that moment. And it was so fast and so shocking. And no one, of course, we're all in cars. We didn't know they were coming, but I'll be in my yard and boom, they appear. Is there some way that we can take that principle in our own walking?
Yeah. Well, the cool thing I've learned from deer, and then certainly all these native people that I've had a chance to hang out with, is really feeling the animal parts of me that can wake up. My vision, my hearing, like just going like that with your ears is a great way to start to think, how am I like a deer? And it does expand your hearing to put your hand behind your ear. It's not as much as a deer. It would be like twice that amount if you had a real deer ear. But to expand your hearing as far as you can, to expand your smell, and just think about it, and it starts to increase. To expand your vision, we're pointed forward, but to see the sides of you more, and to sense that world and the world behind you, right? And then to feel your skin and the hair on your skin and the wind. So just that makes me come alive and feel that I'm just starting to approximate toward a deer consciousness, and then to remind myself how peaceful deer are. Their only defense is really to run, right? Mm-hmm. They can use their legs to kick, but mostly it's running. So they have to be incredibly aware all the time, to be very alert. And that kind of presence is so powerful to me. And that they live very peacefully. They avoid conflict. They respect territory. They tend not to overgraze. They nibble here and there, and they're pretty peaceful animals. So I think it's a good thing right now in our culture to have an animal like this in consciousness, and protect that animal even, to respect it. So yeah, those are some of my reasons for keep coming back to that. And then how to walk like the deer. One fun game to practice is to stop, like walk and suddenly stop and don't move, and just sense, go into all your senses, expand as far as you can, and stay as long as you can until you feel like you have to move. How long can you possibly stay still? And can you almost try to make yourself small energetically so that you disappear? Try that in the city even, just to stand still and kind of make yourself invisible. Because the deer have this special color. It's this grayish brown, and if you look, when they're still, they just become nothing. When they don't move, you can't see them. It's really hard to see a deer, especially at dusk. And they're just so good at being invisible. It's a wonderful, wonderful skill.
Let's come back to this being still thing for another moment. Again, clarification, because if a person becomes still and they're tense, and actually calling energy to themselves.
Yes.
Like, oh, I gotta be still, I can't move. Versus a person who is just still and sensing, I'm kind of answering my own question, but
you mimed it very beautifully just now.
Well, once a month. But I'm taking it in, because I'm thinking to myself, when a person in fear, right? Because we come back to the deer being prey. When we are afraid, we might be still, but we're frozen.
Yes. Right? We project our fear.
And the freeze is tense. And
not freezing tense.
What you're asking for is stillness versus frozenness.
Yes.
I think. Yes.
Beautiful. Right? Beautiful clarification. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the challenge then is to, how do I make myself invisible? That's really kind of an interesting idea, because humans are just so loud and big.
Very, especially Americans. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's another thing I feel is so important with the deer, is that what a great teacher to learn how to be still like that and relaxed. It's hard to stand still for a long time when you're tense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So to practice it in situations where you're not threatened, where you could just practice like you're going on your morning walk and you just stop and then get as still as you can and see if you can watch the birds around you. This is the highest. It's like grasshopper training in Kung Fu. If you're not making the birds part, they're accepting you. And if they come closer, even better, right? Mm-hmm. So you can see how advanced you get in your ability to contain your field of your nervous system, all right? And I like that when I work with clients, I have them try to really bring in their field, their nervous system field, so it's in their mind 6 inches away, really nice and close, quiet. That's the kind of quality we want to have in observing nature and walking in the woods. And you'll see so much more. Your footsteps will be softer, less apt to injure yourself, a lot more fun, a lot more alive, a lot more pleasure.
So what I'm not hearing from you, and I've tried to ask it in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
No. And I think that maybe you have a reason for it. We have this image of the in tune person that walks through the woods, that they walk with their toes first or the side of the foot first, and they tiptoe around. You're not talking about that, are you? Or are you?
It depends on if you're stalking, if you're doing a stalking walk, and I've learned all those walks. There's called fox walk and weasel walk and all these different kinds of walking in the woods. But it's more important that your mind is quiet. That's what I learned from the Hadzabe people. And I feel like I've worked many years with meditation, Feldenkrais, yoga, this naturalist stuff. And when I got there, my mind was so loud. It felt like it was bouncing off the stones. And these people were so quiet. They weren't busy thinking, questioning, wondering, planning, the way we do here in this culture. And that is the beginning of how to walk like a deer, actually. And then this other part where you're talking about specifics with your feet, I have a video on that, of different things to do with your feet, but it comes mostly from being really relaxed. And that is, again, more of a state of mind and a state of what are you doing with your mind when you're in the woods. Because if you're thinking about your work or what's ahead instead of being present, you know, chances are your body isn't really connecting like you know, a cat or, you know, as we should. Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, this has been great. And I just want to quickly ask you, I know you've mentioned several times that you've got videos and products, and people can find out more about all of that by going to feldenkrais.summit.com, where you can link up with Annie's website and different things. Do you have any workshops or anything coming up that you want us to know about?
I've got stuff brewing. The main thing I would encourage people is to sign up on my newsletter. You'll get notified about workshops. I don't send lots of mails. I spent a long time writing these medicine stories on my newsletter, so they take a long time to write. So you won't get tons of mail from me, but then you'll get notices on all my new retreats. I have nature retreats, and then I've got online stuff, and I've got those CDs, and I've got videos, and yeah.
Great. And so just thank you so much, Annie, just so that everyone knows that this video will be available, I don't know, in a couple of hours for you to watch again, or if you missed it or missed part of it and you want to grab it, and it'll be on for free for another 48 hours after that. And then after that 48 hours, you can always, of course, purchase the full access. And just a little perk there, if you do it while the summit is going on, you'll get $25 off. And just to maybe entice you a little bit further, it turns out that Annie has a little bonus thing on her profile page that if you get full access, you'll also get a PDF of some of her awareness work. So there's a lot of different advantages to signing up. One of them being that you don't have to stay up and watch all of these videos all at once. And you can, and by the way, you get transcripts of everything, and you get all of the awareness to movement lessons. So it's actually a pretty amazing package. So once again, Annie, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been very enlightening. I am going outside as soon as I'm finished with this and going for a walk.
Yeah.
And everybody else, please stay tuned. I think at noon, I'll be talking with Benny Bartels about tango and Feldenkrais. So thank you very much, and see you all again soon.
All right.